Good evening. Welcome to the Walter Reed Theatre. You're in for a really amazing experience with this film. My name's Gavin Smith. I'm one of the members of the selection committee for new directors, and I'm really happy to be here introducing this film and having a conversation with the director afterwards, because this is really an extraordinary debut. A film that I saw at the last minute at the Rotterdam Film Festival, just days before we locked the program. I rushed up to the director and he gave me a DVD and got back, flew over to New York, had it distributed to everybody else on the committee, and everybody loved it. It's a film that's a unanimous decision, and I couldn't be happier. Okay, enough babbling from me. Please give a warm welcome to a name that I think you're going to be hearing about again very soon. Kleber, Mendonça, Filho.
Thank you, Gavin. Thank you so much. I really feel lucky to have the film screened here at the New Directors' New Films. The film is still very young. It's screened for the first time in January, actually early February in Rotterdam. And yeah, I'd love to talk about the film afterwards. It's a very personal film, and I hope you have a great screening. Thank you very much.
Right, well, I'll kind of start the discussion. To me, this is a film that's about a society that's haunted by the present, by a sense of threats all around, but also a society that's haunted by its past. So it's a very haunted society. That's how I take the film. That's what I take the film to be about. But can you talk about how you developed this project? What your inspiration was? What the first notion was that led to this film?
I think the earliest memory I have in terms of thinking about the whole concept for the film came from 10 or 11 years ago. I worked for a big company in which I will not give the name, in Recife, and it's a modern company, and we had a modern office with computers and all the technology. But there was a certain atmosphere at the workplace that we worked for some kind of, that we worked in a sugar plantation. That was the main mindset of working in that company. And this is not really an original idea. It's something that it's very often discussed and talked about in Recife, Pernambuco, because I think we have we carry it's like the gene of Senhor de Engenho, which is the master of sugarcane plantations, and which has been historically the big product of Pernambuco, the state where I come from. Sugarcane has been for decades the only product to come out of Pernambuco, this monoculture of sugarcane. And a lot of that mindset is reflected in the way we live our lives, the way we relate to people in the workplace. And there is a certain mentality which is very traditional and very strong, and I think that's the earliest memory I have towards writing this film. So of course the idea of making a film in a big city but in a street, but which had the same kind of system that you would maybe identify with a sugarcane plantation or an engenho, like we call it, that really seemed to be interesting to me. And I'm not sure how it translates here, but we haven't screened the film in Brazil yet, but some Brazilian friends who did not really they were not really part of the process, but when they saw it, they identified it, and I was happy that that came through in a way. This whole the ethics somehow came through.
So you're saying, in the sense that that this street is kind of a microcosm, in a certain way, of a whole kind of system, of a whole social system based around the kind of plantation culture.
Well, it is in a way, but it's Pernambuco is a very peculiar culture. If you think in terms of Brazil, and we have so many different states and so many different cultures and accents. And Pernambuco historically is a very interesting state if you look at it from, in terms of history. And it's really tough to discuss this here because it's really a feeling. It's really something that I feel, and that maybe a lot of people share that same feeling. And I only try to translate that and make a film out of that feeling. But it's tough to discuss it because it's there, it's real, but I'm not sure it's being officialized in any way. I don't think there is a book that discusses it in a personal level, and this is what I really try to do with the film. I'm not sure I'm making myself clear, but
not being well versed in either Brazilian cinema or Brazilian culture, I can say that I felt very caught up in what was going on immediately, and I think that the film builds a certain tension very steadily and slowly, so that any of the cultural specifics that I might not have picked up on didn't really matter. I felt like it completely transcended any of those cultural aspects. So what you're saying is news to me, but it doesn't make me feel like I didn't understand the film.
I think fear is universal. I mean, we all, it's part of our lives in modern society. But Brazil does have a history of violence, and I always say it's perfectly possible to be happy, to lead a very happy life in Brazil. It's a fantastic country and fascinating place, but there is a certain culture of violence, which even if you're not yourself a victim of violence, you feel a certain a constant fear of violence, and this is very much present in life in the big Brazilian cities. Recife is definitely one of them. I have never been a victim of violence in Brazil. But the effects of this culture of violence, or this culture of fear of violence, they manifest themselves in the way we live. And I think that photographs really well.
To get into some more specific things, I'm curious about the way in which you counterpoint the family of João and the three generations, and the family of Bia, who doesn't really seem to have any. There's no real point of contact between these two families, except that they happen to live on the same street. And I'm interested in what you were trying to get at through the kind of counterpointing of those two families.
I think Bia's family has really no relation to the other story, but they do because they live in the same community, and I think they're part of the same mindset in a way, which makes them part of the whole process and the whole panorama. I also wanted to work with that character because I had done a previous, it's a short film called Eletrodoméstica. It was done in 2005. And I really liked that character. I liked this lonely woman who has this great relationship with her kids, and she's like a little bird in a cage, but it's not like a miserable life. It's just a life, a life that takes place on a Tuesday morning. Nothing special, nothing fantastic is happening in her life, and I wanted to bring that to the film, and I think it's part of this. It's like a cinemascope panorama, which, if it didn't work, it would feel very pretentious, and hopefully it doesn't feel like that. It just feels natural that we're looking at her life, and sometimes like an observer, and sometimes like we're living with her.
Question for Emily. It's an independent film, and it's probably a small budgeted film, but the film has a tremendous scope to it. You get the sense of a scale that's much larger than perhaps the budget was. I'm curious as to how you approach the production. Talk about how you put this together.
Yeah, it's a rather low budget for Brazil. And I think the challenge for us was that we had to deal with many actors and many different locations. I don't know, 20 or 30 houses and apartments. So that was the main challenge in terms of budget, and we had to count on the goodwill of many friends and people we knew. So
is this the first feature you've produced?
Yeah. Yes, we produced a feature documentary as well, but it's the first fiction. Yes.
It's just that in terms of the ambition of the film and the reach of the film, it just seems so much more, so much bigger than the average independent film from anywhere.
Yeah, and we also invested in the look of the film, the 35 millimeters. It was important for us because we didn't have that much money in terms of art direction, but it had to look good.
And every time if you keep shooting wide in a low budget film, you'll give people the wrong idea about how much it costs if you shoot really wide all the time. Because I don't know, for some strange reason, very cheap independent films always shoot like this. You can see somebody's nose, it doesn't cost anything to open up the plane. And we really went for this wide, not only wide screen in terms of the ratio, but keeping it wide, because I wanted to show people in their environments. And that, for some strange reason, makes the whole thing look more expensive. And I learned that from John Carpenter, which is he's a director I love, an American director.
It's a great lesson, though. People have forgotten that one, so maybe they should go back to the John Carpenter films. Okay, I'm going to take questions from out there because there are loads. Yeah. This is a question about the kind of the backbone of the uncanny that seems to run through the film, and certain moments, for instance, specifically the boy in the tree, were they integral from the beginning when you were conceiving the film, or was that a kind of a layer that kind of surfaced subsequently?
Well, I love urban legends, and I've done 2 short films, which in fact you can see on the internet on Vimeo. One comes from a local urban legend, which is The Little Cotton Girl, and the second is Green Vinyl, which is from a Ukrainian fairy tale urban legend. It's called Green Vinyl. But for this film, there was another local urban legend, which in fact came from a real story. It's the story of Spider Boy. Spider Boy was a 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old, 18-year-old, and then he got shot by the police. He was not shot by the police. He was shot by nobody knows who, 14 times. And he died like 300 meters from where we live, in the same neighborhood where we shot the film. And Spider Boy used to climb high-rises using the cables for the cell phone antennas, which some high-rises rent, the top of the building for these antennas. And he would just go into the very expensive apartments, and he would eat And then he would just fall asleep, and he would be picked up by the police early in the morning because somebody found this kid sleeping in their living room or kitchen. And then he died, of course, and he would always get arrested and escape from this institution. And so that's where it comes from, Spider Boy. And the idea of this kid, nobody can actually say that he harmed anyone. He was just like worst case scenario, he was a thief. But mostly he was found sleeping in so many houses, and so that's where it comes from, Spider Boy.
But the overall kind of feeling of something almost supernatural that's maybe related to the kind of fear theme, was that something you were actively working for? Is that just inherent in the material?
That's a really good question, because when I set out to write the script, and I told myself, I'm going to write a script for a feature, I thought that I was going for a very realistic film, but during the process, I discovered that I wasn't really interested in making a 100% realistic film because it would be boring. So naturally, I began to drift towards these strange moments, which I hope they feel interesting and not something that was designed almost mathematically, which they were not. They actually come from experiences that I have read about or lived through, and they just found themselves.
Can you mention some other instances in the film, in particular?
Well, the story of the somebody who died in a building, and those the flower wreaths. Is that the word in English? I saw one of those in a building, and I thought it was really kind of heavy, seeing these flowers brought by friends or whoever, and for somebody that had committed suicide 3 days before. And that would look really strange in the film. And that's real, and 2 people in Rotterdam said, but that was made up, right? No, I did see flower wreaths on the ground floor in one of these high-rises. So those kinds of details, hopefully they work in, to give this certain heightened atmosphere.
Well, they do, but in another way, they break the pattern, and so in a way, it makes the film even more believable because it's not neatly kind of laid out. There's a question about the musicality of the film, not just the music and the score, but the use of sound in a musical way. And I would add, I'm particularly curious about that boing sound, the very low bass note that periodically crops up.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the... I love traditional scores in cinema. If you go back to throughout the history of cinema, we have, we all know fantastic examples of Bernard Herrmann. I don't have to say more. But for this film, I didn't think I didn't think I needed this some kind of traditional score for this film, because I thought that I could get away maybe with a kind of it's what I call a sonic carpet for the whole film, and I would use sound effects and noises. And if it was done correctly, no one would really notice that, now he's... For example, I think the most obvious example is the nightmare sequence with the little girl. I could have gone for a string section, with violins and cellos and, typical horror film stuff. But we just used the sound effects from the invasion and we just kept making them louder. And at some point, one of the mixers said, "But it doesn't make sense because now we're inside and it's getting loud." Yeah, but forget it, because I just need to make it louder and louder and louder, even if it's not realistic. So that was one idea. About the Recife sound, Recife, like I said before, yes, has a very strong music scene. And I love the work of Chico Science. He was a wonderful, wonderful person and artist. He died in 1997. But I didn't want to go, the typical Recife sound with maracatu and everything else, because maracatu is very powerful. It's amazing, but I didn't think it would be right for this film. I thought that at some point Bia would be at home listening to Queen or Jorge Ben, which is like a very personal selection, which comes out of nowhere, but it doesn't. It comes probably from her iPod or her. You also asked about that low frequency thing.
Just this note that's held.
It's just one of those things. I worked with DJ Dolores. He's a very talented, gifted artist, and is a good friend. And I told him, I want to work with you, but I want something that would be more than noise and less than music. What can you do for me? And then he sent me an email with this boom, and I go, really? This is you can't get any simpler than that. And I just added to the opening sequence, and I called him and I said, it's amazing, but it's nothing, but it works. It's almost nothing, and that's the genius of it. It's almost nothing, but it is something, and it seemed to work. And I began to show it to friends, and they said, wow, that's really interesting. What is it? It's a boing. That's what it is. It is what it is, but it seems to work, and I was very happy with it.
It sounds like a construction noise that we hear all the time.
Yeah, because in our neighborhood we get these, what you call in English, the pile drivers, exactly, all the time. It is amazing. You really get a sense from listening to this, to Recife or to the neighborhood. You really get a sense that there is money coming in, because in a way I remember it reminded me of the films of Jia Zhangke, Chinese director. I think a lot of his films have to do with this thing in China, construction and work and construction, and so maybe there is a parallel there.
Yes.
It's really tough to discuss references, and in fact I usually avoid it because right. But the thing with references is that when you drop a name like that, John Carpenter, it's the association which you can make as a viewer tends to be, I'm not saying it is in your case, but tends to be very easy. But the way it works in our minds when we're making a film, it's really much more complex. It's not. I don't think it's all about the physicality of the film. You mentioned the invasion, for example, which is easily associated with Assault on Precinct 13, which in fact is a film that I love. But I think it has really to do with a general atmosphere, a general feeling, the way you frame, the way you find the pace for the film, and the whole, the general climate of the picture. In my mind, for some reason, when I was writing the script, I could only think of John Carpenter, but that is probably a personal trip that I had, and hopefully somebody will see the film and, I don't know, make interesting associations. But it doesn't really mean that I was held hostage by John Carpenter while I was making the film. I just made the film, and it has so many other references coming into it, like, I don't know, Eduardo Coutinho, which is a great filmmaker from Brazil, and there is some of him in this film, especially from a fantastic film that he made in 1984 again, Cabra Marcado para Morrer, which is, I think it's 20 years later here in the US. And but yeah, there are so many other references, and John Carpenter for me is one of them because I just love his films. I've loved his films since 1983 when I saw the first film I saw of him was 1983. And so it's really tough to discuss these specific references.
Yes. I think you're saying that there's an exploration of public and private space in the film, and that there's there's an absence of the state, by which I mean, I think you mean the authorities, like police. And then part of your question is also about, does Kleber feel that this kind of built-in sort of DNA of fear and violence and fear of violence, is that something that he sees ever coming to an end, or is it just going to continue? Is that basically it?
There is a moment in the beginning where we see a police car, but nothing happens and they go away. I have to say that it attracted me making a film without any kind of official authority, or the state, or the police, or cops coming in, or politicians, nothing like that, because in our lives we don't really have access to those people all the time, and I think it's perfectly possible to to live your life without having to resort to them. That's one thing. In terms of this DNA of fear, I'm very pessimistic because Recife right now, as I said, there's a lot of money coming in. Brazil is enjoying this economic boom, and there's a lot of money coming into the state of Pernambuco for many different investments, like I said before. But in many ways, it feels like the money is being used to build more tower blocks, and they have these 4-meter-high perimeter walls with electric sensors, and that's the basic idea for architecture for the middle class and the upper middle class. So Recife is really, there is no real thinking in terms of how the city should be thought, should be organized. And it's not only Recife. If you go to Belo Horizonte, and Brasilia is a mess right now. São Paulo, I mean, what can I say? São Paulo is what we all should avoid in terms of what the big cities are moving towards, So in that sense, I don't really see. I can only see this mentality feeding the same mentality in the near future. I'm not very optimistic in that sense, because I think architecture really dictates how we live, and it really reflects how we think. I'm not including myself in this, but in terms of society, and of course we get to travel a lot when we have access to other countries, and when I visit them, I just see that things are different, and I think Brazil, and this is one thing that I wanted to put in the film. It's like bad architecture. Again, photographs really well, but it really sucks in terms of how. I mean, we feel like little mice. And I'm not very optimistic in that sense.
Well, thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you so
Thanks to
much.
Emily
Thank
and
you,
Kleber.
Gavin.